programming, like I think it is one of the closest things to being a wizard that like I've encountered.
We always forget to do the intros, so we should do that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Charlie.
I'm Oz.
I'm Grant.
Hey Grant.
So,
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Are you gonna just like splice this to the beginning? Yeah, for sure. Don't be fooled. This is happening at the end of the conversation.
You know I can cut that out too.
I'm sure you can, but if I keep saying it, then you'll just cut that out too. Yeah.
Grant, who are you?
Who am I? God, I'm still figuring that out, man. I'm a software engineer at Stripe. I studied economics. I worked with Oz and Miles. Taught myself a bunch of computer science stuff. Play music. Yeah.
Which team did you end up on, or what team were you on?
Yeah, so still on the same team that I was on when I joined. It's called Ruby Application Infrastructure.
Okay.
It's just like a subsidiary of developer productivity.
Okay.
I think we have like 800 engineers now at Stripe.
Okay.
Half of them write Ruby. Those are my customers.
Okay. What are the kind of tools and stuff you're building for them?
Yeah, so some people on my team work on the static type checker.
The sorbet.
Yeah. So there's things adjacent to that, editor integrations, sort of integrating that into other parts of our like build system, like using it for code intelligence and other places. But like I think broadly our team is like you'd say we're responsible for just like scaling Ruby at Stripe. So I mean it spans from like application level work to support people who run Ruby services, but it also includes like language level things like int rules and like other static analysis tools.
You guys using like the off-the-shelf C implementation of Ruby interpreter?
Yeah. Which we just upgraded. Like that's
something your team's responsible for, or yeah.
So like that, making sure that like that is up to date and like securely, provisioned and built and signed, etc. But yeah, we're just using the off-the-shelf MRI with, I think in some places, a different memory allocator. I think depending on
what is MRI.
Is it main Ruby implementation?
I think it's
Matt's.
Matt's Ruby implementation.
Matt's like Matthew or something.
No,
or?
Matt's the guy who.
Matt's
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Natsu. I forget his name.
Natsu
here. The inventor.
Nice.
So,
do you like Ruby?
I think so. I did not know Ruby before I took this job.
Did they know that?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I would say that at least half of my team, maybe not half, a little less than half, but like a few people on my team are in that category. Like didn't know Ruby beforehand. Like there are definitely plenty of like product engineers at Stripe who know the language better than people on our team.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a very like different approach from Python, right? Which is very much like one way to do everything. Be very explicit all the time. Ruby is very much do whatever you want. Like we'll give you the tools to shoot yourself in the foot if you want. But I think it is a sharper tool in the hands of like a team that knows what it's doing. I think it's like much more flexible. But I think if you don't have the discipline, either from like a cultural, just like experience perspective, or like the tooling to support that discipline, then I think it can get really messy. Yeah. And so that's probably why my team exists, is to just like help.
When you joined, like how fleshed out was that as a team or a concept when you were joining?
I think as a concept, I'd say my team was fairly well established. I think we've about doubled since I joined, and like 400 engineers writing Ruby is like enough, where you're probably going to be like, okay, we need to sort of
rein this in,
make this a little bit exactly more consistent. So I think it was fairly well established. I'd say the biggest thing since I've joined is this new static type checker, and just like trying to leverage that everywhere we can. I'd say that's probably the biggest difference in one's experience writing Ruby at Stripe compared to when I joined.
Yeah. What's adoption been like for that? Like, were you guys using it internally for a while? Some decision was made to put it external. Like, has GitHub started using it, or some other big Ruby places?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure you could probably glean this from like the pull requests on the. I mean, so and I say that because I'm pretty sure it's not like privileged information, but there are definitely large Ruby shops using this. I think like we were working with Coinbase for a while before we open sourced it to work out the kinks, basically, which is like, hey, try to adopt this. We'll help you. Let us know how it goes. We did it with a number of companies, and I think now like. Yeah, I think external adoption, like the big Ruby shops I know of who like don't already have one of their own, I think are generally interested. Yeah.
Cool.
That makes sense.
I gotta say, I did not expect this as a trend, static type checking. It wasn't on my list of things to like see in the future, but like TypeScript taking off. I also didn't anticipate Microsoft being seen in a positive light.
Paragon. Yeah. People love VS Code.
Yeah, the propaganda is strong. Between that, type annotations in Python and like optional types and entering into a lot of dynamic languages. It's gonna, I mean,
Flow TypeScript.
Yeah.
Facebook's whatever PyTorch or whatever it's called. I know that's something different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think like from like if you've got a web company and it makes a lot of sense maybe to start off with something fairly loose and you just sort of like bolt on types as you go, and sort of like once you get your abstractions right, like solidify them a little bit more gradually. I think like making it gradual was definitely a key like design consideration for us from the start.
Yeah. So when you were thinking about joining Stripe, was it like, I want to get into like deeper into like a specific language, or like what was going through your head?
It's actually interesting. I think like at the time I was pretty interested in trying to work on something like as basically get as low level as I could get. I was looking at some sort of like firmware engineering jobs, jobs at companies that were making hardware products, and I think Stripe ended up going to Stripe mostly, I think, for the opportunity to just work with some very senior people. I got a chance to be on this team. Everyone's like way more experienced than me. They've been around the block. They've done some cool stuff. And I was like, well, maybe there's like, it's my second engineering job. There's probably a lot that I don't know. I think that's turned out to be true for sure. So I think now, I'm definitely like in a much better position to like, do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Involve software. But yeah, that's what eventually kind of pulled me to Stripe. I didn't have anything like specific that I wanted to work on at Stripe.
Yeah.
It was just like, there are some really good people here, and I'm going to work with them, and it's cool.
Yeah. So. I was just I saw Stripe released like a product or two in the last couple of days, like a corporate card and some other thing last week, and I just remember working at a place where we didn't have a design resource, so it was basically as soon as Stripe comes out with a new thing, it's like, okay, here's some gradients I can use for CSS.
Yeah, they do a fantastic job. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
and their little section of the office is by far the coolest like part of the office. Like if you go visit the design pod, they've got like all of these toys and and just like arts and crafts and scraps and things to play with. Well,
it feels like Stripe has, it's like sort of like a experimental, almost like Bell Labsian type approach. They've got like striped press where they're like doing printing. I saw they're like hired someone to handle their carbon offsets and things like that. And it's kind of cool that I wouldn't call it like the natural monopoly that Bell was in the most of last century, but it's kind of cool to have this sort of like infrastructure level company for the internet, and then that being able to like spawn off a bunch of different projects.
Yeah.
Like, is there an ethos of experimentation?
I mean, I think that the co-founders are like very much committed to the idea of increasing the GDP of the internet. Like, a big part of that, I think, is being a thought leader, right? And like trying to increase access to knowledge that you think is important, lessons that you learned. I think like if you look at the publications that Stripe Press has put out, I think it's all very well aligned with like the fundamental mission of the company and like the goals of the co-founders. It's like an argument for increasing economic activity generally. It's a Stubborn Attachments, Tyler Cowen's book. Sort of like the philosophical case for just like maintaining political and economic stability and growth over the long term. And then the Increment, sort of the magazine.
Oh yeah.
That we published. I mean, that's like much more tactical. Just like here's some articles about testing. I think that's the most recent issue. Security, programming languages. It's like how do we just like make people better at software businesses?
Yeah. The important thing about that is that now the Dream Machine,
right,
which is the best computer history book ever written, is back in print. Yeah. For a while, it was like you could only buy a secondhand copy for like $200 or something.
This is Licklider.
Yeah, the Licklider book.
Yeah.
And Patrick Collison bought the rights very early on, the print rights, and I believe he was doing just like small print runs for his friends,
like
and
a
family.
zine almost.
Just like
who has the movie rights?
Well, hopefully him. It'd be great. It'd be great to get a movie out.
I should have brought some copies. Actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah, if you guys want something.
I've never turned down anything.
It's a beautiful edition too. I mean, it's a beautiful.
You've read it?
Like artifact. I've read the first like 50 pages.
Okay.
I think.
Nice.
And then like started listening to podcasts. I don't know. Yeah, that was like back in the time of my life when I didn't know what podcasts were, and then I discovered them. And I was like, oh, this is easier than reading on part.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I've been reading. I've been walking to work. We just moved offices, and for whatever reason, I picked up like gigantic tomes, and I'm like walking reading this,
man,
like
dude.
Hitting people's dogs and stuff.
Yeah.
It's problematic.
For people who can't see, that's It by Stephen King, which is like 5 inches.
Approximately.
Someone said today, this is the shape. No book should be this shape. It's like a brick.
Yeah.
But I try to do something where every October I read a scary book. Because I hate scary movies. I don't like scary things, but I'm like, this is how I'm pushing myself.
How do you feel about scary books? I noticed that you're maybe not all that far into
Well, I just started this morning.
Okay.
So I have like an hour walk. So I got like 70 pages in.
Well, you walk and read at the same time in San Francisco?
Yeah. I know you have to constantly be glancing up and down. And
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it works.
most of the time.
Yeah, it's pretty freaky so far. Already.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't watch horror movies, but I read all the plot synopses on IMDb.
Why? Why do you want to?
It's fascinating. I think part of me wants to know what people think up. Part of me is like interested in maybe getting the thrill, but like mediated through like my ability to visualize it, and like not through some like really
Not like jump scares.
Yeah.
What was the last scary movie you saw?
I mean,
Was it accidental?
I mean, I probably repressed that memory. But there was definitely a recent accidental horror movie that I can't name.
Got it.
What I'm most curious about, Grant, is your transition from product engineering to doing more systems work, supporting other engineers.
Yeah.
Is it what are you hoping for?
I think, I'm trying to think about what my hopes were. I think like all of the hopes that I had with respect to working at a place with like a very solid engineering organization and culture like Stripe, I think all of those hopes have come to fruition. I think, and that was really the only hope, and I guess also expectation that I had going to Stripe. I think, I as I mentioned, like I was sort of planning on doing some like more low level work, and I think originally my sort of reasoning there was that, well, if I start at the bottom and work my way up, like I think I'll have a much better sort of like thorough grasp of things.
Right.
And I've definitely run into issues at work where something comes up, like a box is running out of memory for reasons that like aren't immediately clear, and like I'm able to orient myself and start poking in the right places, but I certainly run into bugs that I cannot fix.
Yeah.
At my job.
I have a similar like craving in terms of, I don't know if it was like a comic or something, but like with enough time and enough rocks and water, like I could make a computer on a desert island or something. Or you've seen people do it on like Minecraft.
Yeah. Right.
And like I want that, and some part of me is like I can't do anything else until I can make a computer out of Minecraft,
right.
which is definitely not the approach. But you're right. Like what are the things you can extract that like will enable these other things? At the same time, like if that's what you want to do, that's awesome too.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's a good. I mean, I think you captured it. Like I do have that tendency, right? I have that tendency to feel that I can't do the thing until I understand it from the bottom, and like sometimes that has helped me, but most of the time it means that things take longer than they really should.
Do you feel that in any other element of your life, like driving a car?
Oh yeah.
You're like, I need to take apart this car in order to understand it.
I think it's. I think this tendency in me definitely pervades. Like it. I think like unrestrained, I will like apply it to everything I do. I've had to just like get older and like notice the times when it causes problems for me to start to deal with it. And so like now I'm like much better at being like, you know what, I don't need to know that. Like I'm gonna just use this thing. Maybe it doesn't even do what I want all the time, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna spend the time now to try and like understand it.
Did you? I kind of looked at your LinkedIn a little bit, but did you take time off between maybe your first engineering role and this one to explore and dig in some way?
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Yeah. I think that so that time off that I took was immediately after spending time with Oz and Miles going through their first like sabbatical program here, and I think that was really the first time that I'd dived into a lot of these like more fundamental computing concepts, right? I think like before that experience, my knowledge of computing like stopped at Python. It's just like anything below that I hadn't even really heard of before. So we kind of covered a lot in that time, and I feel like we moved relatively quickly, and like after that experience, I was just like, well, I have a much like wider idea of what's out there, and like I know many more things that I don't know.
So was this was like a guided version of teachyourselfcs.com?
This was in the very early days. We did a full-time program that was like, do you remember, was it 10 weeks? 12 weeks?
Yeah, something 10 or 12.
Yeah. The idea being like take the intensity of a boot camp, but apply it to actual computer science. And we had mostly boot camp grads. We had like a recent high school grad. Handful of folk like that. And it was like
everyone's going through the same curriculum, or folks are picking their pet areas of interest?
At the beginning, everyone was doing the same thing, and then over time, people kind of found the projects that they liked working on and dedicated more of their attention to that.
Okay, so this was the like recurse center type thing, but maybe more guided.
It was more guided. The more parts of the day were like direct instruction from Miles and myself.
Yeah.
But there was plenty of like working on a project as well.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, and I think after that experience, I had no commitments. I had never like been, I think, really free to do like whatever I wanted to in my life, like up until that point, which like now is a pretty crazy thing to think about, but like really up until that point in my life, I had just been in school or working.
Yeah, you're on the train.
Yeah.
You got put on the train in preschool, and you're
Right.
like, oh, what's next? This. How did you feel like you could jump off in the first place? Like, because you had worked as a software engineer for a while.
Yeah, for a little over a year at that point. I think, I think choosing to take a leave from that first job, which was at a place called Clover Health, to go and work with 1,000 Miles. I think like that was when I think made that decision for myself and like gave myself permission to like spend my time how I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And originally I was going to actually return from that sabbatical and like go back to work for Clover, but decided that I really wanted to just like be by myself and like and just hang out and learn some stuff and travel a little bit. So it was actually a pretty easy decision. Like once I'd sort of given myself that permission.
Did you consider like after the sabbatical, like doing something else other than software engineering? Like maybe I'm gonna like dig into some other subject, or was it just I need to figure out what I need to do within software engineering or firmware or whatever?
Yeah, at the time I think my interests, I was pretty focused. Yeah, I wasn't really thinking about much else. It was like I've been given this, a sort of like an outline of this domain, maybe like a low resolution map, and I wanted to go and add some detail.
Yeah.
And do a lot of hiking.
Do a fair amount of hiking, yeah, a little bit of traveling. Whatever I wanted to. It's amazing. Just like do whatever you want every day.
How long did that last? Like, why did you stop doing that? Because you need food.
Yeah, ran out of money.
Yeah.
I think I made it a little over a year, just like living off of savings, eating beans and quinoa and kale, almost exclusively,
Power foods,
and
yeah.
eggs. Yeah, and really not doing much else. Yeah, just like eating and then like studying and coding.
So what areas did you like focus on in that weird exploratory?
Mm-hmm.
Not weird, but
yeah, I'd say the big areas were operating systems, programming languages, and data structures, algorithms to some extent. I wanted to do some more computer networking work in there, but didn't end up getting around to that. I'd say those are the big three. Yeah, that I focused on.
So when you started interviewing, did anyone blink at the fact that you'd taken a year off? Like, what did you tell them? What was their response?
I think truly like I did a fair amount. I'm pretty proud of like what I got done in that time. I think if I were to do it again, I think I'd be able to use my time more efficiently now. But I got a fair amount done and like had code to show for it, and I think that in addition to being like relatively good at talking about myself and just like explaining why I did this and like what I got out of it, I think those two things basically meant that I think anyone I told that story to, they were just like really excited.
That's awesome. What was an example of a thing that you showed them?
So I'm trying to think of a specific example of like showing someone something. There was that ray tracer class, I think, that Avik had here, which like had the nice property of like, you know, the final output of that was like a very sort of convincing image of some like spheres and, you know, some lighting and you could sort of just like got to take a screenshot and put that in the README and yeah, so that had the visual aspect to it. But I think you know, I like worked on a little toy kernel and a small toy compiler. The artifacts of those projects were just the GitHub repos. So really, you know, you can like send a link to that and be like, well, here's proof of what I did. You can like compile it and run it if you want. It's not going to do a whole lot. I don't know if anyone actually did that.
So did you like show the folk at Stripe your compiler, and that was a part of the conversation of ending up on the Ruby support team?
I think I definitely included links to them in like every cover letter that I wrote, and like probably in my resume too. I can go back and take a look. I don't know if anybody at Stripe actually looked at it. I know that I talked about it in when I interviewed there. They have an interview where you just kind of talk about like your experience, basically your past and your future, and you know, that definitely came up. But I would not be surprised if like in the entirety of my interviewing, like only a handful of people actually like clicked those GitHub links and like went in. But I think just like, I mean, I you know, from the perspective of someone who interviews candidates now and like looks at resumes, I think just like knowing that someone is motivated and interested enough to learn these things on their own, and also like does not fall into the trap of just reading and like not doing any implementation
practical stuff,
right? Is a huge sell, and I don't need to go and like look at the repo to know that.
So your computer science education has been HackReactor, if that counts.
Yeah.
And then
I
said computer science.
Okay.
And then
I learned about it.
Okay, let's say you know your computer science and software engineering education.
Sure. Yes.
HackReactor, about a year of work experience doing mostly web stuff. Basically, no Bradfield, like 10-12 weeks of full-time Bradfield, and then a year of self-study. How do you now feel this compares to someone who has like a conventional 4-year CS education? Like, for instance, someone that you might interview from a school.
I think I can. Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on the work. I've interviewed CS degree holders, like, of astounding like variations in ability. Like, I've definitely been very surprised at how much and at how little.
What's the like? I'm very curious now. What's the like interquartile range? Like if you. Like, I know that there are outliers who, you know, already at the age of 18 before they even started MIT would be employable anywhere. And then also people who like didn't really do a CS degree, they just like got the CS major at the end by some bureaucratic mistake.
That's what I mean, I've definitely interviewed people who strike me as that. And like, that's the case that I find myself wondering about, is like, they got this Berkeley EECS degree, like a supposedly very prestigious and like very well known CS program, but like they're having like lots of trouble either like implementing very simple things or even describing very simple things.
But do you think you're still stamped with non-traditional, or has your last couple of years at Stripe like pulled you out of that sort of cast?
You know, there are definitely, I think in my area of the org, no. Or I mean, in my area of the org, I don't think that I don't think anybody thinks about the fact that I do not have a degree. There's at least one other person on my team who doesn't have a degree. There's definitely work at Stripe that is pretty much done exclusively by people with CS degrees, like from specific institutions. These are also people who would probably be doing that work regardless of where they went to school. So I think that for the kind of work I do, it doesn't come up.
Yeah. I was wondering, this goes back to you sort of on your own for the year. How did you guide yourself in terms of, I'm going to work on building a toy kernel for today, and then tomorrow I'm going to do this? Or like, how did you think about how unstructured versus structured was your sabbatical?
Yeah. I think on a like week to week and like month to month basis, like fairly structured. I think I knew that I wanted to learn more about operating systems. I knew that I wanted to learn more about programming languages, how they're designed, how they're implemented. And so I kind of had a rough idea of topics that I wanted to hit, and had some guidance from just like going online, looking at courses, and just like reading what's on the syllabus.
Did you have like an accountability buddy or an Obi-Wan Kenobi guide style thing?
No.
Maybe it was Oz? No.
No. Part of me wanted to see if I could do it without one. Mm-hmm. For me, that I thought of that as sort of a litmus test. Like, if I really need an accountability buddy, like maybe this is not for me. Like maybe I'm not as interested in this as I might be in something else.
That's cool.
I don't know if that like would work for everybody. I had the privilege of like basically having no demands on my time, and I think that's pretty rare. And like that's partly why I wanted to take that opportunity, because like how many times do you get that?
Where did you do your work? Were you at your apartment? You didn't did you put on? Do you stay in pajamas all day? Like what was your?
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I was in an apartment in between Coal Valley and the Haight.
Yeah.
And I was just basically in pajamas, and like when it got cold, we didn't have like heating.
Yeah.
I would just like wear mittens.
I always think of the Forgetting Sarah Marshall scene where he's at home for the week and just eating the giant thing of cereal out of that huge bowl.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Basically my life, except the bowl was filled with quinoa and beans.
Yeah, and you didn't come up with
other canned foods.
Muppet-based musical about vampires, unless you did.
I would have if I wasn't programming all the time. Yeah, no, totally. It was I was just like on my own, and I had 2 roommates at the time.
Yeah,
and so I didn't go crazy.
Were they working full time?
They were working.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise I was on my own by design. I think both from like a desire to just be totally free and not have any demands on my time, but also as a test of like what do I do and what happens when I'm left to my own devices completely.
Yeah.
Do I actually maintain momentum and like interest in this subject?
Yeah, you eliminate all excuses. Right. That's cool. Do you think that another sabbatical is in your future, or not? I'm not saying like imminently to anyone listening to this, but it's more just like that clearly was effective for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a luxury. I 100% I will do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at some point. And I think I would like make something very good with that time. And I think a lot of people sort of feel like, oh no, I need to have like a job, or I need like a place to be at a consistent time. But I think it's maybe easier than a lot of people think to discover what you're interested in and to spend time on those things.
Oz, have you sabbaticaled? Are you on a sabbatical right now?
But my life is gradually turning into a sabbatical, which is lovely. But the closest thing that I did was straight after school. I tried to start a company in scare quotes. I didn't know what I was doing. It was actually like an online education platform, so it kind of come full circle. Wow. Yeah, but I my version of this was like first thing that I did was I went and incorporated because I felt like that was the most progress to do, and then I spent 6 months programming without showing anybody what I was working on or talking to anybody, and then kind of got bored of it the moment I had to try and convince some other person to use it. And so what it ended up being was like 6 months of just learning new technologies and building stuff and being creative. And that led directly to my first full-time job as a software engineer, basically because of the people who I showed the thing that I was working on. But that was like an accidental sabbatical.
You studied math, right? Was this after your...
Yeah. I did some computer science as part of that, but my major was pure mathematics.
And then law school happened.
Law school happened at the same time. In Australia, there's a kind of, it's called combined law. You basically do graduate law concurrently with your undergrad over 5 years. So I did that. The first big regret of my life.
That 5th year?
The
entire
thing. Doing the two together, because you're effectively doing 2.5 years of both.
Is it English style law? Like, are you a barrister with a wig and things like that?
I'm not, personally right now.
Yeah.
It is the common law system.
Yeah.
So there are barristers that come out of that, and they do wear wigs and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Common law is excruciating, by the way. I mean, the US is also a common law system. It's not like Europe where they try to codify all the laws, and there's somewhat of a place that you can go to understand what the law is. In common law systems, you need to read past cases, and the judges are interpreting laws, and they've been doing this for literally 800 years or something like that, and it's totally illogical. Like, it just doesn't make sense at all. At least with the civil law systems, that in trying to put it all in one book, they're at least confronted with the fact that there are constant contradictions.
Well, as a citizen, how are you expected to know what the laws are in common law?
Oh, you're not.
You're just supposed to abide by like the golden rule. How am I supposed to know if I go into a given state that this isn't allowed or not?
Oh, you have absolutely no idea. I mean, the lawyers barely have any idea. Like, if you're a lawyer in one area, it's unlikely that you're going to know the law in another. So that's not really what the law is about. But what's excruciating about it is that I had to make that decision as a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old finishing high school, and everyone told me the law was logical, and I felt like I wanted to be somewhere that was not software, but it was logical. And then you get there, and it's like, well, this judge said X, but this other judge said in some circumstances not X, and then this other judge contradicted both of them. But he was allowed to do that, but as a consequence, subsequent judges are not allowed to do the other thing. And you just keep
It's a lot of if statements.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if there were just a bunch of if statements that all made sense together, that would be okay. But they just
non-deterministic.
Non-deterministic. Yeah. This is kind of a really off topic here, but someone started. You started it. I started it.
No, it's
fingers are being pointed.
Oz, your path is interesting though. Like, because we're talking about like, I think all of us or none of us here studied CS directly in college. But then, like Grant, in your case, like it sounds like 1 or 2 years out, you're like, oh my god, this is this entire new area that maybe if I had gone back, maybe I would have been a CS major instead of whatever you were.
Maybe I'm not convinced of that just yet.
Yeah. What do you mean?
I think I personally, I think this one's like, I think people get all sorts of different things out of college. But like college is very good for me, purely in terms of like a identity formation, like community I think I went to some in hindsight, I guess, just like as a high schooler and middle schooler, was not in very I think intellectual communities, and I just thought that was the way the world was. I got to college and I met a lot of incredible, but also like-minded and interested people, and that was the first time I was among people like that. And I think I did a fairly light degree. The economics degree is one of the shortest, I guess, majors at Pomona, if I remember correctly. And I left a lot of time for other stuff.
That's awesome.
That was really valuable for me. And so I don't know if I would change that. But maybe if I'd gone, I don't know, maybe if I'd found that kind of community as a younger person and had a better idea of what I was interested in at an earlier age, I could have I would have gotten a lot out of a more sort of technical undergraduate experience.
It's very interesting to me that you could find an adequate substitute for the learning part of college by sitting in your pajamas, eating beans and quinoa, not talking to other people, and just writing an operating system kernel on a compiler. Yeah. But you cannot imagine yourself finding a substitute for the social and personal growth aspects of an American college, a liberal arts college.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I've spent a good amount of my time post college, the last 5.5 years, trying to replicate bits of that experience. Yeah, I think being in the same place, doing the same thing as a bunch of people who, ideally are good at stuff, or at least curious and interested and are there to learn and are there to meet people. I think being in that environment where you have that and a bunch of people who ideally are excited about nurturing that community, I think is it's really hard to replicate. That's what college.
Because they're not
at its best.
Are they? They're not quite your friends. Because I'm just this sort of idealized group of people, because it's kind of nice in my mind to in this thing we're describing, new people come and go, and it's almost like a club rather than a group of friends, which adults don't really have clubs as easily as they have this is folks we're getting dinner with this week or something.
I mean, are you saying that the other students at your college are not necessarily?
Yeah. So the thing about college is you're kind of thrown into this thing and you're all in this mixing pot together.
Yeah. And
then you have this weird shared experience that you're going through.
Yeah.
Adults don't really have that unless you're you're explicitly trying to curate your living experience to be like this. Because I know that there's folks in San Francisco who live in large houses where there's 20 residents, and they have group dinners and group meetings, and those folks are going to an extreme to create that sort of mixing melting pot type thing. Right. But if you're not doing that, it's kind of hard. Maybe it's work.
Exactly. Yeah, it's jobs where people spend too much time in the office.
Yeah. And I think it feels to me there's a lot of that in the Bay Area. People who are not from here coming here to work in technology and sort of using work to fill that void, whether or not they realize it.
Oh, totally. Yeah. My first job in tech in New York, we at Friday night, they'd finally rolled kegs into the office, and we'd be salivating from noon onwards, and then we'd be hanging out there till 2 a.m. or something. Yeah. This is just this is your cult that you join, and a lot of companies try to do that. And then I've heard recently that I don't know who this was, but it's your company isn't your family. It can be, but you should also your company should support you having a family outside of this. Yeah. But as far as that company goes, it was some of my best friends are from that too. Yeah. So
it can work for sure. Yeah, it can work.
So that begs the question: if you did not go to liberal arts college, if you, as an 18-year-old, went to work for a cult-like technology company, would you have done the same thing?
Yeah.
Presuming there were other people like that there as well.
So that you weren't the weird aberration. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's when younger relatives or people who are in this position to think about college or going to work for a software company, I think like what I'm always curious about is like is this like a sufficiently like developed personality? Like
well, if you give them 4 years to develop it,
right.
That's like, because you didn't develop your personality instantly when you showed up at college.
Right, of course. But like, what would have happened if I'd spent those 4 years in the company? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I know of exactly 2 people who have made that choice, who forewent college to work for companies, and I've yet to follow up. I can't say. Maybe, like theoretically, I would imagine, of course, it's probably possible to do the opposite of what I did, right? Go deep on skills, employable skills first, and then at some point, spend all your time, probably wouldn't be in your pajamas at home, but like spend a year like learning how to, I don't know, figure out like what your values are and like learning what kind of people you like gravitate to and like who you want your friends to be. I guess like the challenge is that as we mentioned, like I think it's hard to you like need to be in an environment where like everyone is at that stage. I think it seems much less feasible to me to just like decide as an adult that you like want this for yourself, because like everyone's already done that. The timing is an issue there.
Yeah, I even liked that at certain jobs where I'd have a cohort of people like all starting on the same day. My first jobs were at like investment banking, and you like explicitly have a cohort, and you're like, it's almost like just college continued. You're like a first year analyst, a second year analyst, and there's that shared sense of like, we literally have no idea what we're doing, and you grow based on that, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's like this does exist in places. Yeah, that's good to hear.
How do you think about like we talked a little bit about like sabbatical in the future? Like, what are the things you're like interested in now, and like how are you exploring that?
So these days, a lot of my free time goes to music, and people. So my parents recently moved to the Bay Area. They were in Boston for a while.
Cool.
So now we like live in the same place again. This is the first time like we've lived in the same region with me being an adult, and I think that's like it's novel. I didn't expect it to be as novel as it is, but like I think our relationship is like changing for the better.
That's awesome. My folks are on the East Coast too, and my fiance's are as well.
Yeah.
How'd you convince them?
Oh, they. No, I did not.
You didn't have to.
They were very much. It was very much a push up. I think it was always sort of the plan for them. They want to be near me.
Yeah.
I'm the only one they've got. I'm an only child, so I think they basically, as soon as the opportunity presented itself, they jumped at it.
Awesome. Are you performing music, or is it just teaching yourself an instrument?
Yeah, these days, I've like performed in the past. I've been musical my whole life, but like mostly kind of on the side. Played an instrument as a child, as like many second generation Asian immigrants do, but it was like all rote sort of memorization. And so I'm at the point now where actually like, I'm like in a similar spot where I was with software probably like a year and a half ago, where I've got some experience with it, but want to know a little bit more about how it works, sort of peek under some of the abstractions. And so more recently it's just like learning theory, hitting the books, and then sort of being mindful about like also just like producing as much as I can, just like playing every chance I get.
What's your instrument of choice?
These days I spend most of my time on the piano. I also play guitar, but I have a keyboard in my room for the first time in my life. I played piano when I was a child, but so it's like been a while. It's kind of like going back to an old friend actually. And so that's been really nice. That's where I spend most of my time these days.
I want to learn piano so bad.
Dude, it's I think that the quality of like online music curriculum generally is like a lot lower than the quality of online software curriculum.
Okay.
But like with piano specifically, there's a lot of good content.
Can you send me some
on YouTube?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can literally learn anything there. Yeah. So I had guitar lessons in like 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade and stuff, and it mostly amounted to this guy, Matt O'Ray. He looked like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
What a name.
Oh my God, he's awesome. And he'd come up to my room and he just like tuned my guitar, and I just asked him about his life. I was like, what's up, man? And we like literally, we'd have like, he's like, we got 10 minutes left. What do you want to learn? I was like, some Green Day song. He like transcribes like 3 power chords and then leaves. And so I never got good. And to this day, I can basically only play like power chords, and I can read tab, but I just need to learn how to read sheet music, because when I see a piano, like, you don't want to be a guitar guy in like a place, but like if you can play like a Christmas tune or something on piano, it'd be so satisfying.
And then you can make millions just playing power chords.
That's true.
And you got good at asking questions.
Oh yeah. Oh my
and
God.
I think that's probably
Matt O'Ray is the coolest. I ran into him like 2-3 years ago in my hometown. I was like, Matt, it's me, and he didn't remember. So Matt, if you're listening, I still remember you.
Yeah. I mean, if you played that Green Day song for him, I think you would recognize it.
Yeah. Oh God. His memories of like that. He's like, this guy, he won Guitar World.
What's
Rising.
Guitar World?
Guitar World is a guitar store. There's one on like Van Ness and stuff, but it's all over. And he won like Rising Blues Musician of the Year. So this guy wails. Yeah. And then I come in and it's like, can you teach me like when I come around? He's like, oh God.
He's like, yeah, man, come on. Yeah. Actually, I'll just let you keep asking questions about my life.
Yeah, please send me my. I'd love some like recommendations on piano.
I mean, my mom's been going through. My mom's been teaching herself piano. And this is like, she started from like scratch. I mean, she never played any instrument or did anything musical in her whole life. But she retired about a year ago, and got a piano and has been just teaching herself through YouTube.
Have you tried to like make an app for her to learn or something? Have you connected the dots? Like, oh mom, I can program you the best curriculum.
She seems to be doing pretty well with her teacher. That impulse never came up, and I think in part it was probably because like I was really excited about the idea of her like getting to know this teacher, and who's like also an older Asian lady. I think from what I hear, they get along really well. Yeah. And I want them to be friends, so I don't want to automate her. Good. But I think that's like where I've spent a lot of my free time recently. I think like, who knows what a future sabbatical would entail. I like, there are definitely things in the realm of software computing that I really want to dig into. And honestly, if I had like 3 more hours every day, I would.
Is it still on the low level side? Like, what are the things that are
recently? I mean, like, so I think probably the first thing I would dig into is networking. That I think is an area of my work that comes up like somewhat consistently. That I just wish I understood better. Mm-hmm. I think like we have a fairly complex setup, and like a lot of it is a lot of like what is like a lot of the complexity is Stripe specific, but I think that there are like some fundamental things that at least principles that like I think could go a long way to helping me just like rock all that. Mm-hmm. And so. Yeah, I mean, I think a future sabbatical would probably entail a little bit of both. So, I also want to like, I think, once I master both of those things, then I'm going to learn how to cook.
Oh, that's nice.
That's the next thing.
Yeah. Do you cook for yourself now?
Not well.
Yeah.
But occasionally, Stripe feeds me very well, and I eat a lot, so I think it's like a good. It's a good match. much. I'm getting my money's worth, as it were. When I cook for myself, I don't do a great job of it, but like I think I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have you thought about baking bread?
I've tried that, so that's one thing that I did in my pajamas when I was unemployed, and like never got like a baking scale, and so I think was just like.
So that's key, right? The scale, because my friend just gave me like a piece of his starter, and it's now in my fridge, and I don't really know what to do. And he says you have to buy a scale. It has to be like perfect. You
know, I think in hindsight, like I think I was like maybe frustrated at just having to like compare everything. I like convert everything from like mass to volume all the time because all I had was measuring cups. So I think yes, you like need it to like get consistent results, but like also if you're doing the sourdough stuff, like you got to control like the humidity and temperature of like your entire environment and like.
See, that's surprising to me because people have been making bread for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right.
They figured it out.
I mean,
it was definitely not a precise measurement of stuff.
Yeah. And I think maybe they just got like, well, yeah, who knows? I don't know. I think like elite bakers would have you believe this, and I think that you can just like even if you're doing the sourdough stuff, just like make some bread, and then, like sometimes it'll turn out a little bit like dense, but it's still gonna be bread. It's still gonna be better than like most of the shit you get in the store.
Yeah. Okay, I'll report back on how this goes.
Can I curse?
Yes.
I do. I now have to mark this as explicit.
All right. Fair enough.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, every episode's been explicit so far.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good.
What was the curse that you had in mind?
Oh, I think I
give us a good
one.
one.
It's already too late.
Yeah.
I totally missed
it. It already went by.
Okay.
I thought you were asking us so that you could like use your favorite curse.
For listeners at home who missed it, I said shit a second ago, and I feel kind of bad about it.
What was it in reference to?
Bread?
It was in reference to most of the bread that you can get at the grocery store.
Oh shit!
You feel bad about insulting the bread or about resorting to that crude language?
Both, because there is good bread at the grocery store. Yeah, there it is, and it doesn't deserve what I just called it.
Very kind of you.
Yeah. So it's better. It's the amateur sourdough that you make, Charlie, will be better than a lot of the perfectly decent and adequate bread.
Grant, I appreciate the vote of confidence. I'll tweet a picture of it or something. Yeah. We actually had pizza made from this starter's cousin.
That's
really
amazing. Yeah.
Oh my god, it was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I want in my life.
Yeah. Yep. Sourdough crust. Yeah. That's awesome.
So we quickly segued from creating software to creating music to creating bread. I'm curious, do you guys think that there are people who are creative and people who are not creative? Like, is this a model of the world that you have? That some people enjoy creating things and they'll equally enjoy creating bread, music, software, whatever their like collection of things is. And there are other people who are more oriented around consumption or just like non-creation.
So I guess for the purposes of this, like our definition of creative is like one who enjoys creating.
Yeah.
Enjoys making something.
Yeah, even if they're not prolific, if like derive pleasure out of making something that they immediately throw away. Yeah, that's a creative person.
Yeah. I think that I don't think I've met anyone who I really feel, given the opportunity to do either, like would just like generally prefer consuming like at all times.
Empirically, like Netflix is doing really well.
Netflix is doing really well, yes.
Gaming is taking off.
And I think that, I think that there are probably some games that like I would define as creative. And, there are certainly forms of consumption that I think are very worthwhile. And, enriching and valuable. Clearly, I think, if like everyone was just making something all the time, making shit all the time, and like never looking at what other people made. I feel like that's probably worse than everyone doing a bit of both, right?
For sure, yeah. I don't mean to be disparaging or like suggest that there's one true way, but I'm curious if you feel like if your model of the world includes the fact that some people enjoy creation and some people enjoy.
I think some people are more inclined to be tinkerers and sort of experimental in the various things. So like picking up various projects, putting them down, but probably everyone in their life has something that is their area of like creativity, and maybe it's making that sandwich in the morning or something. And it's like a little private little spat of creativity that they allow themselves, and maybe the rest of it they're they're enjoying the latest season of whatever on Netflix while they're eating that sandwich. But I think it's in human nature to like find your way.
They're consuming.
Yeah, you can do both. I'm creating to consume.
I think my model of the world definitely includes people who enjoy creating. Yeah, I mean, I think like to like make something in your own image, right? I mean, to like sort of.
I'm now picturing a sourdough that looks just like Ryan.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You spend enough time indoors in your pajamas, and like, your food just does start to look like you. I think like just like the act of I guess I don't know. Yeah, I think I imagine that a lot of people would just like enjoy the opportunity to say, I'm going to make this thing the way that I want to make it, right? Like, here's a chance for me to like impose my values on the world and do something the way that like I think it should be done.
So even very creative people are only creative about certain things. Like I feel like I'm pretty creative when it comes to using technology, but I've never had the impulse to dance. I mean, I just don't dance. So my next question is, do you feel like to be a successful, or maybe better word, fulfilled software engineer, you need to enjoy the act of creating software? Like, you enjoy making music now. There's no one who's encouraging you to make music. This is just, you want to go home and make music. And you also enjoy writing software, maybe not as much as music right now, but at other times, probably more than making music.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Certainly, to a great extent.
Mm.
There are a lot of people coming into the industry now who do not have that kind of feeling towards software, but who want to make $200K a year. What are your thoughts on on that?
I think that I think it's generally a whole lot easier to be good at the thing you're doing when you enjoy it, but not everyone needs that, right? I think some people are maybe intelligent enough or have spent enough time already doing it that they can make $200K a year without having to try that hard, and I guess without having to like put in the kind of effort that would be extremely painful if you didn't enjoy the act. And so I think like maybe it's worth trying to get an idea of like where you are on that spectrum, so that you can properly weight like your enjoyment of the thing, and so that you can properly decide like, okay, well, I enjoy it this much, like what does it actually mean for my sort of long-term chances here?
There's like, I hate doing it.
Yeah.
This is miserable. I hate debugging. This is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
There's like, I really like it. And then there's like, I don't even know if this is the right spectrum, but there's, I really like it. I'm just bored of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think then the sort of thing you set up, Oz, it's probably gonna be problematic for people who just fundamentally don't like the activity of whatever their job happens to be. Mm-hmm. That probably doesn't make for a happy employee or a good workplace. But you, like, as Grant's saying, like, maybe it's fine to just get something and you can do it well. You're just bored to tears by it, and you keep doing it. That's that's not how I would want to live my work life.
Sounds
but
very sad.
sounds very sad.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's unenjoyable.
I think there's a, to your first point, there's a calibration question as well, and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who wrote the book Flow, has a really graphic way of thinking about this, which I'll try and verbalize. But if you imagine like a two-dimensional grid where on one axis you have the difficulty level of a job, and on the other axis you have your skill level, then you want to stay in this narrow diagonal band where if your skill level more or less
Sure.
matches the job's difficulty, then you can remain in flow state. If it is too difficult for your skill, then you're overwhelmed by stress. If it's too easy, you're overwhelmed by boredom. And so you got to kind of navigate the.
This is like video game design.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't want to get too good too quickly and outpace the challenge. Ideally, the challenge is growing with you, and so you're staying in this narrow band, and this is how you're still having fun with it. So I think someone who like enjoys playing sport, let's say, can find themselves in the wrong part of this chart. But that's not the thing that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about people who just have not enjoyed writing software ever. But are doing it because it's a good living.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't make money and feed their families and so on. But there's so many people in our industry who actually enjoy, like, absolutely love, like, lose track of the time, make a cup of tea, start programming, and 5 hours later they realize they've got a full ice cold cup of tea on their tables. Yeah. And those are the people that they're competing with at some point.
Well, I think it's a problem of the schools over-promising to people who are looking for something and seeking something. And like, you could paint, it's sort of like the same problem that happened with the for-profit universities, like the University of Phoenixes and things like that are like
Phoenices.
The Phoenices.
Yes.
That might make us the Phoenicians. Yeah, that's better. But like they're making promises about what that'll do to people's careers, and there's not a lot of follow through on terms of like what are people actually learning.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably some folks in this category you're talking about who have like made their way into software engineering in a path where they didn't really understand what they were getting into. But
yeah, I guess it shakes out. I guess they find kind of ancillary kind of jobs. Lots of them become product managers and so on. But
there's a literacy that is valuable, I think, no matter what.
For
like,
sure.
because you can come in and make, like, you can do a boot camp or something, and then you can become a UX designer or a customer support type person, and just like, frankly, speaking the lingua franca of, I don't even know if that's the right way to say that, but like the sort of like lexicon of our times. That's super valuable, and you don't have to be an engineer.
For sure. Yeah. The thing that I keep thinking about is whether software engineering is inherently a more creative industry, whether inherently it allows for people to enjoy their work more, get into flow states more, and feel through their work the kind of thing that you might feel through music or cooking or something like that, as opposed to conventional professions that are attracting the same kind of salaries. That's what I think is potentially an interesting divergence that we see, where being like a doctor or a lawyer, well, being a surgeon is one thing, you can't get that flow as well. But for a lot of the conventional, being a management consultant or an accountant or something, they used to be similar levels of prestige. Maybe now they're lower in prestige than software engineering. And they don't seem to be like innately creative to the same level of software engineering.
Okay, so I've had to do some of these like 3 statement models at Morgan Stanley, and it's software engineering. You have this like super complicated spreadsheet where you're balancing like the cash flow statement, and this feeds into the balance sheet, which is driven off of the income statement. And if you make like one error, the whole thing like refs out and explodes. And to like wrap your mind around how all these different files are working and how these things trigger, and how you can like goal seek to find these things, like that. Frankly, like a lot of the software engineering stuff is like 10 times easier than even managing that one spreadsheet.
So I don't know that not to derail the conversation, but did you guys see the article today about the journal article that was going around saying that some absurd percentage, like 10%, 20% of papers in genetics were found to be flawed because the researchers would put the data in Excel to do the analysis, and certain genes were interpreted as timestamps, or it's like it's literally 20%.
Oh my god!
We're gonna have to put this link in the show notes because it's just
1 out of 5.
Yeah, 1 out of 5.
They should have like an Excel, like geneticist edition.
Yeah.
That just like
that just
doesn't
turns off
have
as soon as you turn it on.
That tells you to learn Python as soon as you unload it. Right.
This is that same prop to fully connect the dots. This is the same problem like of Ruby, where you're giving people ultimate power and flexibility, and then they just like can really shoot themselves in the foot by that. Because Excel's, you can do insane things with Excel. Before I even knew what a database was, I knew a database.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't know those things.
I think you're wrong. I think you are very wrong.
I am open to being convinced otherwise. Oz, is this like something that you've, I guess, to go back to this point of like maybe people entering the industry because they're more financially motivated? I guess is this something that you like personally are observing?
Yes. Yeah. Over the last 5 years, from when boot camps are still not very well regarded to now, where it's like they're established institutions basically. I've seen a lot of people who are like explicitly motivated by the comp or lifestyle aspects, like work from home. Who just realize technology companies offer a better overall proposition for someone coming into the industry. And yeah, I mean, if the boot camps were like about getting into finance, I feel like I'd feel differently about it because that's the entire proposition. And maybe you're going to succeed if you're financially motivated. Maybe that's the whole point.
Right.
Well, I think it's nice that the tech companies have allowed. They don't have the traditional gatekeepers
For sure.
that a finance or management consulting thing. Like they just haven't set themselves up for that. So I like that tech has allowed itself to be accepting of non-traditional in a way that these other industries haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's not. I think that's unequivocally a positive thing. But maybe what happens is that this means a lot of people can go and start those jobs, and then a year or two in, you start to find those who like or don't like their work, and it just shakes out, and it's okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a problem at all. I just feel like, getting back to what you said, Charlie, maybe this increases the burden on these institutions to be clear with the students about like what it takes to succeed, not just at getting your first job, but at having longevity in the industry.
Yeah.
When you're competing against people who really love the stuff, really would do it if they weren't paid for it.
Yeah, I do agree that that's something that boot camps that just never comes up in the conversation, right?
Well, yeah, they're super focused on getting that first stat, like getting the whole class hired. But and I think they have, at least Hack Reactor has attempted some like reach out on the alumni side to see, but like it's hard to do. It's hard for them to really have a coherent strategy around like the long-term careers of folks versus getting them in the door. Maybe their job is enough at just getting folks in the door. And hopefully they've given you enough foundation to be able to be exploratory with it.
Well, I mean, I always respected Dev Bootcamp for this. They would treat themselves as explicitly the first step. They would talk about this idea of being a lifelong beginner and cultivating curiosity and learning more. And so they were very clear about it. And then Hack Reactor, at least in the early days when I was more exposed to them, were more on the side of saying, this is it. Like, this is all you need. This is as good as a university education. And it's not really talking about what would happen subsequently.
Okay, so my take on it was when I was working at that tech company after Morgan Stanley, and I was more in like a sales role, I wanted to teach myself programming. Like I did a little stuff with like Arduinos, and then like for a while I'd be really into Python, and then something would come up at work and I'd forget about it, and then I did a little iOS stuff, and I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't have any sort of guideposts. And I think the Hack Reactor message for me, I'm curious what you think, Grant, was like, here's a scaffold of the things you need to learn to get employed, and here's also like, we're putting you in a, so 1, scaffold, 2, group of highly motivated people who all want to learn, that sort of cohort thing, and then 3, work ethic. You get what you put into it, and hopefully with those things combined, you have this sort of tool set that can get you into the industry and then allow you to feel like, okay, I do have more of guidance around like, what are the weird areas of interest I want to explore next, like Grant did. So Hack Reactor for me kind of achieved that. Yes, they maybe can say like goodbye as soon as I get that first job, but maybe that's not their job. But maybe that's not their role. They get me that job, they give me these tools, and I can move on and like build my career based on that.
So I feel like they believe genuinely and are telling the students that they do provide the framework for the subsequent continuing education in technology, and they don't, in fact. And Grant did not pick that up at Hack Reactor, in fact. And there were topics, entire areas that he didn't realize were entire areas.
Well, they don't spend enough time on it. We do databases, at least we did, for like a day.
But it's like databases like write SQL. It's not databases like understand the query planner and query executor and what a database engine actually is. You talk about tools that are related to distributed systems. So you don't talk about distributed systems concepts. You talk about algorithms in the context of solving algorithmic problems for interviews. There's much more to it than that. So, and that's totally fine. I just wish they were explicit about like how much of that they're actually exposing you to, because there's an implicit like dig at conventional universities.
Yeah. But
conventional universities do actually a very good job of this, where you go to Berkeley and, if you're lucky and you're motivated and so on, you are exposed to all these things really well. And you may not recognize that for 10 years, but...
I think, Hack Reactor, I think, has like, and I guess like any boot camp, I would say that probably any boot camp in this category has a lot of incentive to just like get as many people to give them money, obviously, as possible, but then like get them all the way through, right? And when their primary metric is like percentage of graduates who get jobs afterwards, like I think I'm trying to think back to like my experience there, and there certainly was not a lot of like, oh, by the way, there's like all this other stuff over here. We're not going to cover it right now, but like you should know about it because like it might come up, or you might be interested in it later. It very much was like, we're just going to get you a job right now.
Yeah, and it speed dates you through all these topics that if you really do dig this and you are the person who like loves engineering, you should dig into these things further. But maybe that's not the explicit contract. And I think they should be more clear. Like, we are giving you the speed dating version of this.
But do they even do that? Do they like speed date you through compilers or something?
No, they don't. No, they don't do everything, but they do enough of the important things, I think, to get you that job and then get you in. And then you're kind of SOL unless you find something like, a mentor at work, like a nice library, or like a teach yourself CS type thing where you can like, oh wow, it's true, I really don't have any understanding other than like what I'm doing and making this React component right here. So I'd say this all being like, I'm very satisfied with what Hack Reactor did for my career to make me go from what I was doing before to the place I am now. I don't think they overpromised. I think they like exactly delivered and provided the like way for me to do that. But maybe other people are interpreting it differently, and maybe they're blustering in their marketing speak in a way that
there seems to be pretty good customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
So, but I think people want the first job, and that's what that.
Yeah.
But a kind of side effect is potentially that you're in your first job, you don't realize that there's more that you could learn, and there was a missed opportunity. Someone at Hack Reactor could have said, we're not going to do this because it's not a priority, but there is this whole field, and you might want to come back to it in 5 years. And universities do a really good job of that.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing that can be said for like all these different paths is like you just don't know until you do the thing, right? Like even if you go to a 4-year program, like to your point about like we're having you're observing a lot of people just sort of like going through these programs and like working for a little bit and then it shakes out. Maybe they discover that they don't like it. Yeah, maybe like in a few years, however long it takes, like demand will slow down and supply like will catch up enough that like that just won't be possible. That like there will be enough competition where someone who's only been doing it for 3-4 months, like that just like it won't be feasible for them to get their first job. And so like everyone going into the industry will have to like think a little bit harder and like ask themselves these questions. But yeah, right now, I mean, like if the market will support it, yeah, maybe people are gonna do it. And use that first job maybe as like the litmus test. I think I was definitely thinking about that. I was like, well, if I invest $12,000 in 3 months, I can then see for myself like if this work is.
I mean, it's a way better strategy than going to law school or something stupid like that.
Right.
Also, I think the tech jobs, it's a better quality of life generally. It's like you want free food, you want to dress like a 6th grader and go to the office, like this is the place to be.
Yeah, I feel like if the like markets for these different like in different industries, whether we're talking about lawyers or doctors or accountants or consultants or what have you, I think it's like probably clearly better for the employee if there are ways for them to get fast-tracked into the industry and like do the work as quickly as possible with the assumption that like it might not be for them, and then all those people can get weeded out, and then you don't have like the sort of opposite scenario where like everyone in an industry just like regrets that they're.
Are you concerned about folks having fulfilling careers? Is that like the root of this?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I love software engineering overall as an industry. I feel like it's one of the best possible combinations of being able to express yourself, think about interesting systems, have an impact, like have leverage. But this is a promise that I think only makes sense if you, as someone looking at this, are enjoying that process. Sure. Like if it were really, really lucrative to make sourdough, but you just did not enjoy it. You met someone who didn't enjoy making sourdough. Would you push them to do that? Yeah. Like, would they be able to tolerate being in a bakery with flour on their face and whatever, making sourdough and hating it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want people to feel that.
Yeah. Like, short of, fast tracking someone into a job, like, do you think there are things that maybe we should be doing more of to give people who are thinking about doing this kind of work a better idea of like whether it's suited, whether they're like well suited to it?
Good question. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I definitely don't think it's mandatory computer science education in high school. I think this is the worst possible thing. You get the like most perverted view of what it's like to actually write software. I think the more that kids can like hack around with little things. I know there's no more MySpace, but like making your MySpace homepage ping whatever, and like Neopets and stuff, like whatever it was that people Minecraft, whatever it was that people were using to get exposed to building stuff. That's the best. It's like we have more of that available, then more people at a younger age can get a sense of what is the fulfilling creative part of writing software. And if that's the narrative, rather than first year, like a fresh out of school employee at Facebook makes $200K, then I think more of the right people are going to be in fulfilling jobs. Yeah,
I agree, but I think that that issue is going to afflict any occupation that's in demand, right?
For sure.
But previously it was Wall Street.
But see, I think like during the junk bonds rise, when anyone could get into bonds trading and everyone did, like, were there people who enjoyed it and people who didn't? Were there some people who found it like really creative and others didn't?
Have you read Liar's Poker? Like, it was just like a free for all. Everyone's like smoking cigarettes, gambling, and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, but it seems like everyone was driven to make money.
Yeah.
And so it was like a kind of
no, but there's like a thrill about the work, I think, and you're like surrounded by. I remember when I joined Morgan Stanley, it was like right in the financial crisis, and it's like, look at CNBC, and they're like talking about our stock price plummeting. I was like, oh, I'm at the center of this, and there's like, I don't know, there's like some weird.
But do you feel like only some people feel that thrill, and those are the people who are going to succeed, and other people adjust?
No, I think you don't need to feel the thrill. I think you can grind through it and just be
because the money's there.
Just feel like because the money's there. Yeah. I just had a flashback.
I mean, that's what I suspect may be different about software engineering. That there's a wider range between the people who just love it and want to code overnight and just go to bed because it's the responsible thing to do, versus the careerists where
that's probably true.
It just, I mean, I don't want to denigrate accountants, but it seems like there's less of a spectrum there, and that more of the people see it as just a job, and wouldn't do it for fun. Like I see so many people who like.
There's creative accounting, Oz, on Wall Street too, if you're interested in that.
Creative accounting.
Yeah.
It's something that we should wrap up soon. But something that I've noticed is a lot of software engineers who make a little bit of money on, like, they get lucky with an IPO or something and retire and do open source work. Yeah. Or who fantasize. You see people in the financial independence subreddit all the time who are software engineers who want to retire so that they can do open source code. Like, what other industry has this where you want to
do this shit for free? Yeah, I'm gonna make a lot of money now.
I bet someone who's like working in a garage probably wants to retire early so they can build a hot rod from scratch.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think working in a garage, I think, is comparable to software engineering. Well, I think it's all about finding a system, a complex system that you can navigate in some way, and then the spectrum is like how creative can you be versus like routine. Like a dentist navigates a complex system of your teeth. You don't really want them to be too creative, but then like someone in software is like more on the creative side of that system. But how do folks find the system that interests them, that they can like offer this to someone else for economic value? And it's hard, and like as you pointed out earlier, like when you're 16, how the hell do you know shit. How do you know like what is the right system for you to explore? And I think it's cool that I was able to choose a couple different times in my life. I was very lucky. All right, we should wrap up. What's your favorite book?
Oh shit.
What are you reading right now?
You can't say shit yet. This is the start.
We haven't given the cursed disclaimer yet.
Yeah.
My favorite
spoiler
book.
horn.
Oh my goodness. This actually kind of ties into something that
you'll hear about soon.
I was thinking, what?
I don't know. I thought it ties into something we already talked about.
Yeah, that we're going to talk about imminently because we've agreed to talk about it, and not that we've already talked about it. About sort of like the nature of software work. One book that I really enjoyed as a child and which I actually reread recently was A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. And it follows a young mage in this world where magic is, and like magical power is predicated on knowing the names of things and like understanding like the core essence of something and thereby understanding its name, and then thereby gaining power over it. And I think that world really stuck with me as a kid, and I think to the Oz's future point, that like perhaps there is something fundamentally different about programming. Like I think it is one of the closest things to being a wizard that like I've encountered in my life. I think music's also up there, but I think we've got this system where you learn these arcane incantations, and if you speak them right, you get some like poisoned sand to do math for you, and it's like pretty pretty, I guess intoxicating when you're doing it for the first time. And I think compared to a lot of things that I've done in my life, I think it is easier to reach a flow state.
That's a cover of SICP, right?
It is, yeah. Hal Abelson would do lectures with a wizard hat on.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it's magical. The stuff in the book is magical.
Yeah. We've just we've put some lightning into a little rock. And try to do math for us. Yeah. If you say the right words. In the right order.
With enough time. Yeah.
With a semicolon at the end.
With a semicolon at the end. Yeah.
Thanks to our type checker that you're working on.